Welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Hello everyone, it's Jesse Green here. Welcome back to SavvyDentist.com and to the Savvy Dentist podcast. It is fantastic to have your company for another episode of our show. Now, if you're a practice owner who's motivated and driven and wants to get the most from their practice, whether it's earning more income, having more free time, or just enjoying the journey that bit more, I want to encourage you to come and join us at the Savvy Dentist Facebook group, because when you're in that group, you're going to find some tools, some training, and some tips to help you create that higher income, to help you move from an operator style business to a true ownership business where you have money and time, as well as enjoying the journey that bit more. So do come along and join us there. There's plenty in there for you. All you need to do is search for Savvy Dentist in Facebook. The group will pop up. Please take a moment to answer all the questions before you join, and then we'll look at your application. And as long as you've answered those questions, we'd love to welcome you there. So tonight, I want to talk to you about a topic that I think is really important, and I think it's a topic that's very timely. I've been talking about this now for the last few months with our private clients, and I thought I wanted to talk about it a little more publicly. And the topic I really want to talk about is how do we build a practice that is resilient to whatever the economy throws at us. So whether the economy is going up, whether the economy is going sideways, or whether we're going through a downturn, I want to make sure that you're in a position of strength and resilience. And so we could perhaps even call this title Recession Proofing in Practice. Now, there's a few things that I think are important to understand, and that is economic seasons always change. This too shall pass is that wonderful Chinese proverb, and whether we're going through periods of growth or periods of contraction or anything in between, the seasons always change like they do with the weather. So it seems to me at the moment there are some storm clouds gathering, and it seems to me that we might go through some contractions. So I want to make sure that you're prepared for that. But I also want to declare that I'm not an economist. I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not making predictions. I don't have all that, I don't have a financial services license to make those predictions or anything of that nature. But what I do have is 25 years or more of experience practicing through all manner of different economies. I graduated in the 1990s when we had in Australia that very famous recession, the recession we had to have. We've gone through the Asian financial crisis. We've gone through the dot-com boom and bust. We've been through the global financial crisis, of course. Most recently, of course, we've had the pandemic as well. And so while I'm not an economist, I wanted to share with you lessons and experiences from 25 years of real-world in the trenches experience that I hope will be really helpful for you to build resilience in your practice and position you for long-term success. And so there's a few things I want to share with you, and that is a few key mindsets perhaps to start with. And the first mindset I want to share with you is that defense is the best offense. So we want to plan for the worst and hope for the best. We want to make sure that we're operating defensively. And of course, part of that means we want to be mindful about waste reduction. We want to make sure we're not wasting money here, there, and everywhere, because what we know is in good times, people's purse strings tend to loosen up a little bit, and we want to make sure we're operating prudently at all times, irrespectively of the economic circumstances. But we also want to play for position, because one of the things that I've observed is as the economy contracts, oftentimes that affects people's mindset, and they can become too negative. They can go too far into their shell, and the pendulum swings too far the other way for them. Because what's important to also understand is that on the other side of any adversity is opportunity. And during economic contraction, typically you see asset prices decline, and those people that have been prudent prior to that decline have managed their debt levels, built strong cash positions, are able to take advantage of those asset declines and pick things up relatively cheaply. And so what I want to share with you is the guys that we've been working with now, not that anyone's necessarily hoping for an economic contraction for sure, but they're also very well positioned to capitalize on those opportunities. And I want you to be in a good position too. Now, there's three core principles that I want to talk to you about tonight. The first one is around money matters. We want to talk about protecting your number one asset, which is your patient base, and of course, retaining your team. Now, in particular, I want to talk about money matters a great deal. I'll talk a little bit about retaining patients and retaining your team, but I've got a few other resources I'll share with you at the end of this podcast to go into that in more depth. When it comes to cash flow, we need to be really mindful of keeping our cash flow strong. A lot of people really focus on the top line, the revenue, and of course, that's one number. But the great saying that revenue is vanity and profit is sanity and cash flow is king holds true. And what's really important around that is we need to always be mindful of the bottom line rather than the top line. And so to do that, we want to make sure that we review our financial forecasts or budgets. Now, in the community that I operate in, which is the Practice Max or Savvy Dentist community, our clients do a whole bunch of financial forecasting. They measure their progress against that forecasting, and they know up to the minute where they are financially. They know what's happening in their practice from a financial point of view. And what's really interesting is the insights that come from that tracking are profound. They get to understand what's working in their business at the most minute detail, and they also get to understand what's not working. But from there, they can analyze that data and know what lever to pull to get things moving in a better direction or to continue in a great direction. And so when it comes to knowing your numbers, it's really important to project out. You need to have a forecast or a projection and measure your progress against that. Now, we use a very particular system that I designed. In actual fact, I commissioned a merchant banker from JB Ware to design that for me. And it's something that we've been using now for years. As I said, it provides huge amount of insights. And it's very dental specific, but you might be able to do something basic on your Xero file or your MIB file or whatever, but you want to have something that is, at least something that's going to give you some insights there. Now, it's also really important that if you're going through a period of upheaval, you might even want to shorten that time period and do a 13-a-week or a quarterly forecast as well. So that's key number one. Now, when it comes to money matters, key number two is to always collect your accounts receivable. If you've got money that's owed to you, you want to collect that money and get it in. One of the basic tenets of cash flow management is to get money in as quickly as possible. We want to make sure that money is in your bank account. So please, please, please collect the money that's owed to you. One of the other tenets of cash flow management is to pay money out as slow as possible. Now, just to be clear, I'm not saying be a bad payer, be a bad debtor. That's not it. We need our vendors to remain in business too. But if someone gives you, 7-day terms or 30-day terms or whatever it happens to be, you're well within your rights to utilize those terms. And of course, one of the things I'd share around money matters as well is to always have a cash buffer. Now, I talk about this until I'm blue in the face. I call it a rainy day account, whatever language you want to put to that, but you want to have a really strong cash buffer. And what that does is it means that if for whatever reason you can't operate or for whatever reason you get an unexpected large bill, you've got it covered. It's the peace of mind, sleep at night account. And ever since I've been a dentist, I've always had a rainy day account. When I was a young dentist, before I had a practice, I had a personal rainy day account. Now in my practice and in my other businesses, I have rainy day accounts for each of those businesses. I want to make sure that I have an insurance policy. It's my financial moat that keeps me safe. It's my financial moat that lets me sleep at night. And I'd really encourage you to have one. Now, the obvious question is, well, how big a cash buffer should I have? At a bare minimum, I'd encourage you to have 3 months worth of expenses put aside to cover any contingencies. Now, in my business, I have 6, 9, 12 months worth of cash buffers. That's just me. I like to have that. It helps me sleep at night, and I enjoy that. Now, that's probably a little excessive for some people, but for a bare minimum, do have the 3 months. Okay, so do have 3 months worth of cash buffers. Now, the fourth thing around cash management or money matters is to minimize or eliminate waste. And what's really interesting around this is to understand that in a dental practice, the potential for waste is really high. And where a lot of waste occurs is in staffing levels and in materials. So let's just talk about materials for a moment, and then we'll talk about staffing. Now, from a materials point of view, you want to be able to streamline your ordering processes so you have the limited amount of stock that you need. You have the minimum you need to keep the job going. And what I mean by that is inventory sitting on the shelf is money sitting on the shelf. And we want to make sure we turn that inventory over regularly. We want to make sure we don't have stuff sitting on the shelf for months or years on end waiting to be used and ultimately going out of date. So one way of minimizing waste is to limit the types of products you have. So I like to think of South West Airlines as a model of this. Now, South West Airlines are one of the most profitable, if not the most profitable airline on the planet, and they have one type of aircraft. So they have a Boeing 737, I think it is, which means one type of spare parts, one type of training for the cabin crew, one type of training for the pilots, one type of everything. And so in dentistry, the way that translates is we might have one type of composite, one bonding system, one of this, one of that. And that means we don't have 27 bonding systems, 14 composite systems that we use for very specific circumstances that come around once in a blue moon. Now, I like to operate that way. I like to streamline what we do, but I also think inventory management is also really important, having checking in, checking out processes so you know what stock you're holding. Most people don't know what stock they're holding, and there's tubes of composites sitting in the back of a cupboard somewhere going off that we don't even know we have, and it's money that ultimately gets thrown out. So with waste elimination, that's the first part, is around your consumables. Now, the second part of waste elimination is around staffing. We need to make sure we're rostering efficiently. We need to make sure we're getting efficiency dividends from our team. So if you have permanent staff, that's great. You want to make sure your staff or your team are fully utilized. You want to make sure that they're productive, they have clarity about what their roles are, they have clarity about what their deliverables are, and you measure those outputs rather than just measuring how much time they turned up to work for. Now, equally, if you've got team members who are casually based, you might want to make sure you're efficient with your rostering so you're not having more staff than is needed. You want to make sure you've got appropriate staffing but not excessive staffing. So when it comes to waste, wages and consumables are two big areas that we see a lot of waste in a dental practice. Now, the fifth thing I want to share with you around money matters is managing debt levels. As interest rates rise, you want to, of course, keep your debt levels well under control. Now, again, I can't make any particular give you any particular advice on what level of debt you should have in your practice because everyone's circumstances are different, but you've got to be able to make sure you can cover those payments really easily, really comfortably. And you've got to be able to build buffers in for increasing interest rates, which we're seeing right now. The interest rates in Australia rose by 50 basis points this week, and that means our interest rates on loans are going to go up. That's going to impact cash flow. So you want to make sure that you've been able to pay down debt where you can, make sure you're negotiating the best interest rates. If it's appropriate and possible, have offset accounts for your various loans and so on. And finally, this might sound a little counterintuitive, but you might want to think about getting financing before you need it if you're going to be applying for loans in the future. Typically during downturns, credit tightens up. So if you're thinking that you might need financing in the future, please do make sure that you apply for that well ahead of time. Give yourself leeway. Make sure you negotiate the best deals, shop around and so forth. But please do apply for that before you need it. So that's key number one, is to make sure your cash flow is under control. Review your forecast, make sure you have one, collect your accounts receivable, utilize payable terms as appropriate, build out cash buffers, reduce waste, manage your debt levels, and get financing before you need it. So let's move on to key point number 2. And I'm going to skip through this pretty quickly, and that is around protecting your assets. So the number one asset in your practice is your patient base. And what's really interesting is I really feel very strongly that the patient base or the database in our practice management system is often mismanaged. We see people entrusted with a multi-million-dollar asset who have no training on how to utilize that database, no training how to keep it clean, no training on how to keep it up to date, no training how to follow people up. All of those things are entrusted to very junior team members, often on a fairly basic pay rate. So I want to say to you that first and foremost is please understand your patient base is an asset that needs to be protected. It needs to be looked after with intention, and I'd say that needs to be resourced appropriately and adequately in your practice. I'd even go so far, if you're a bigger practice, you could almost have someone in charge of the database as a full-time job, or at least a good part-time job, solid job. So when it comes to retaining your patients, of course, we want to increase communication. We want to deepen those relationships. We want to make sure our recall system is operating effectively and well. We're not leaking patients there. We want to make sure we're not leaking patients through missed appointments, whether that be cancellations or no-shows. We want to follow up incomplete treatment. We want to reactivate patients as appropriate, and we want to do that regularly. We don't want to do it just because. We want to do that systematically and routinely. It's also important to understand that reactivation processes are a campaign. It's not a one-stop piece of communication. It's not just send off an email or a letter or a text or whatever. It's a multi-staged campaign. And again, in Practice Max, we find that when we use campaign-style reactivation processes and how we do it with very specific timings and batching and all those sorts of things, we've seen up to 30+% of those patients become reactivated. And that's hundreds, if not thousands of patients on a database. And finally, when it comes to retaining your patients, I'd say do any treatment that's appropriate right now. Get that done. Bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. So that's really what I want to say about protecting your patient base. And the third topic I really want to talk about tonight, of course, really briefly, is around team retention. We know that at the moment, people are really focused on recruitment, but of course, it's like patients, the best thing you can do is hang on to your great team players. And we want to understand what drives team retention. And of course, what drives team retention is training. So there's career progression, there's growth, development, and so on. We want to make sure there's competitive remuneration. We want to have positive work cultures so that people feel happy to come to work and they're not, feeling like they've got to drag themselves there every single day. We want to decrease waste and increase utilization. So team members want to feel like they're making a difference. And of course, they want to feel like they're productive too. So team retention is really key. Now, of course, I've gone over that fairly quickly tonight, but please understand that retaining your team is critically important because it costs 6 times the amount of money to get a new team member than it takes to retain a good team member. By the time you go through the recruitment process, the loss of productivity and so on, you're far better off retaining your good team members. So do give that some care and attention. So really what I've tried to do today is to give you 3 things to think about as you encounter the changing economic circumstances. And that's all really well and good. But of course, preparing for an economic downturn requires planning, it requires consideration. And that's why I really want to invite you to an upcoming training I'm running on October the 19th called Recession Proofing Your Practice. It's a free webinar. You're all very welcome to come. I'll put the link in the show notes. So please do come along to that and get yourself prepared, get yourself ready so that you can ride out any storm that comes, but not just ride it out, position yourself for growth on the other side, because we want to make sure you come out of this stronger, better, more nimble, and able to create real wealth on the other side of that. And there'll be opportunities that do come from that, provided you do the right things now. So come along to that training. I'd be delighted to share some in-depth information with you there and take you through what we've done over the last 25 years to ensure we've come through every single recession in better shape than we went in, and to create massive opportunity on the other side of that as well. So do look in the show notes. We'd be happy to invite you to that training, and I look forward to seeing you next week on the Savvy Dentist podcast. Take care. Have a good week. Bye now.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast. For more episodes, go to drjessiegreen.com/savvydentist. And to discover how to build a high-performance dental practice, visit drjessiegreen.com and download the free report.